Highguard. So if you've been tuned into mainstream gaming discourse of the past month and a half or so, you probably have heard a little something about this game called Highguard, the game that essentially headlined the most recent edition of the Game Awards, often better known as Jeff Keighley's Trailer-rama, where the man Jeff himself prefaced the announcement by saying that this game was made by the previous developers of Titanfall and Apex Legends, and it was set to push the shooter genre forward. Combining those statements with what was the premiere trailer spot for the show really set some lofty expectations, and what followed was what appeared to be a rather by-the-numbers hero shooter that will be launched later on that following month. You had a weird mix of high fantasy, the futuristic weaponry of Apex and Titanfall, and whatever the hell was going on with this guy's hair, all wrapped up in a trailer that really did not do a great job of giving people an idea of how the game actually operated. People, gamers even, you know, the people that rarely blow things out of proportion, they didn't take kindly to this. Over the following days, one of the largest takeaways from the Game Awards was the question, why was that trailer in the spot that it was when it just looked so generic? There were theories starting to emerge like there was another game like Half-Life 3 originally planned for that spot, but Valve pulled out, or that the devs spent millions of dollars in order to have their trailer be the headliner. Some people even asserted that Jeff himself had a personal stake in Highguard's success. All of these things turned out to be debunked over the following weeks, though. The damage was already done at that point, and absolutely no one wanted this game, and many people were calling it the second coming of Concord before we even knew what the game was actually like. The devs took the strong and silent approach to this one by not putting out really any statements on the game until a few days before launch to let people know that they were going to be putting out some gameplay trailers on their YouTube channel, which I think might have been one of the better things that they could probably do given their circumstances. Like, at least they didn't go full-on Splitgate devs and start putting their foot in their mouth by saying some of the stupidest shit you've ever fucking heard on a public platform to promote their game. But at the same time, I don't think staying silent necessarily won anyone over either. If it did anything, it made people feel bad for them because at the end of the day, they are an independent team that were just put in that position because Jeff Keighley wanted them in that slot. And don't get me wrong, I'm also not fully blaming Jeff on this one. I genuinely think he really saw something in their project and believed in the devs enough to push that narrative forward. I really doubt there was anything nefarious going on with Jeff's plans here, but to say that this was a huge miscalculation would be quite the understatement. It was a colossal fuck up. If Highguard was just placed like one slot before the one it was given, it still would have had some detractors, sure, but it also wouldn't have been put under the microscope like it was. But hey, the game is here now. Did the devs prove people wrong? It's a little complicated, but no, not really. So as soon as Highguard launched, the game was met immediately with an overwhelming negative reception, especially on Steam where only about 20% of the reviews were positive. Now, clearly this was a result of a lot of bad faith review bombing, since the game hadn't even been out for an hour and there were already thousands of negative reviews. As the day went on, and through a combined effort of Steam cleansing some of the obvious bandwagon riding reviews and some more positive ones starting to trickle in, the game moved up to still a mostly negative score of 34% positive ratings on Steam. What does Highguard do different from other hero shooters? Nothing.
Because that's what
Jeff Keighley
wants.
Concord
Was bad.
I agree with that.
Okay, I mean, that was kind of an obvious thing to assume would happen. How are the player numbers, though? Just looking at Steam numbers here, since that's the only piece of data we really have to go on, for a game that launched in the middle of a Monday, Highguard actually peaked at nearly 100k players, which, say what you will, it's way fucking better than whatever Concord was able to pull off. With all that being said, I'm writing this script a little over 24 hours after the game has launched, and the player base has already dwindled by over 80%, down to the 18,000 mark, which is like the type of drop you'd see in a few months, not one day. If there's anything telling about the game's quality, it's gonna be that right there. So fuck it, here we are, talking about Highguard because I feel like if I don't do it right now, the game might disappear and I'll never get a chance to. So you've probably got a couple of questions if you clicked on this video, like, does this game really deserve the hate that it's getting? Or is it even really that bad? And the answer to those questions are both no. Unless the devs kicked like an actual puppy or resurrected Hitler, I don't think any game deserves the amount of hate that this one has been getting. Especially because after playing several hours of Highguard, I can tell you that there's nothing offensively bad about this game. I would never call it a good game by any stretch of the imagination, but I would be lying if I didn't say that I think there actually is something to the formula here, but but it just feels so rough around the edges. Like, I played nearly 10 hours of this game, and it feels like I'm playing something that's still in a pre-alpha state here. The first few matches I played, I actually thought the game was kind of good. Like, I was learning the mechanics, saw how a typical game played out. I was actually surprised. Maybe I was just shocked that this game wasn't the Concord level of failure everyone was expecting, or maybe I went in just trying really hard to like this game, but I was at least enjoying myself a little bit. As I played more, the cracks started to become more and more apparent. The systems that I thought were interesting, I realized were very half-baked, and I started to see the game for what it was, an unfinished product. Like, you have a lot of stuff that can be ironed out with patches, like the terrible performance issues that many people are facing at launch, or the number of people who have to fiddle around in their BIOS for the use of the anti-cheat, or the server instability that was thankfully fixed shortly after the game launched. But then you have the weird mismatch of ideas that permeate throughout the game that just leave you feeling like something isn't complete here. In order to get a better idea of what I'm talking about, I think it'd be best to explain how the game of Highguard works, so strap in, we're going elbow fucking deep into the mechanics of this one. So Highguard is a competitive 3v3 shooter that will have you gear up and attempt to siege an enemy's base in order to win a match. And I already know we're gonna have some questions here. Let's start out with maybe my biggest surprise about booting the game up for the first time. It's 3v3. The reveal trailer obviously didn't do a great job of showcasing this, but you can only party up with 2 other people currently for a match. So if you have a larger friend group, sorry, there might be some people that have to sit out since we have a limited party size here. Maybe they can, I don't know, go play a better game. This is, in my opinion, a completely needless limitation, and in fact hurts the overall game, something that I'll explain as I go on. Okay, what about hero design? Well, I don't actually think this part of the game is too bad, honestly. There are only 8 heroes to start with. Each of them have some decently interesting, if pretty standard kits. You have the guy that throws fireballs, you have the guy that raises ice walls, you have the guy that throws lightning spears, you have the stealth character, you know, stuff like that. These heroes are a lot closer to something you'd find in Valorant or Apex Legends, rather than something like Overwatch or Marvel Rivals. They have a passive, an active, and an ultimate ability, but proportions, weapon selection, and health values are all in line with each other. This obviously makes the hero portion a little bit less overall impactful, but for the type of game that Highguard is trying to be, I think this is fine. You won't really have anything from these character kits that you haven't seen done before from basically any of those other games I just mentioned, so take that for what you will. The characters all at least look somewhat decent too, if a bit on the generic side. There's no yellow trash cans, no green Ryan Reynolds, no Drax, but what if we made his head red instead of blue? Just some hot characters wearing some rather interesting get-ups. Do they call this guy John Highguard because he has a guard around his high taper fade? I went with this guy because he looks like Ken from Street Fighter. And then I saw one of his skins and I was like, wait, this literally is just Ken. And he has a skin that's a reference to Big Boss from Metal Gear Solid 3? Come to think of it, a lot of these characters kind of just rip off other designs. Like, tell me that Scarlet doesn't look like she would belong in Dune. Or what's up with this guy that has a skin that makes him look like an orc in Warcraft 3? Highguard will try to trick you into thinking that you're playing a better game, but don't you fall for it, you're too smart for that. Alright, you will select your hero, of which there can be no duplicates, and then the game begins. So we load into our first match of Highguard. What does the core gameplay loop look like? Well, the way I see it is, Highguard is a game that has 5 different phases, with phase 4 or 5 being dependent on what happens in phase 3. Sounds a little complicated, but I'll go over each of these phases in order, as well as talking about the mechanics as they come up. Starting off, your team actually gets to vote on which one of the bases you wish to use if you're defending. This is kind of a cool feature, though I can imagine as this game goes on, some of these will probably be phased out due to some sort of meta forming, but a fun concept nevertheless. I think the base designs are visually interesting since they kind of pull from a variety of fantasy architecture, with my favorite probably being Hellmouth, since I'd like to pretend the enemies are trying to raid Bowser's castle or some shit. Alright, we're now into the game and we are told to lay down some defenses, and we just need to stop right here for a second so I can bitch for a while. This part of the match essentially acts like a setup phase, kind of like something from Rainbow Six Siege, where you can fortify your base for when you're being attacked. But in the same breath, I feel like I just insulted Siege by making that comparison. Here is what happens. You spawn in, you get 5 reinforcements to strengthen walls, you pick those 5 walls around a bomb site, and then you sit in the base for another 45 to 30 seconds waiting to be let go. That's it. You don't place any traps or any methods of detection or have any different choices of reinforcements. You just give 5 walls of your choice the ability to be slightly more sturdy. And when that just means that the enemy now has to use 2 rockets instead of 1 to destroy that wall, that really amounts to fuck all given how easy that is to do. It is really telling that you have so much time to do this, because clearly the devs think you should be making some careful decisions on how to fortify your base, but it's literally the same thing every time. I'm sure they anticipated you going into your loadout to change a few things too, but you are really only picking between your 2 primary weapons here, which I'm going to bet you're probably just going to find 2 that you like and stick with them most of the time anyways, making the extra time you are granted a complete and utter waste. This part of the game just feels straight up unfinished. Like, imagine if every hero had their own defensive abilities that they could use to put stuff in their base in order to make the choice of hero more interesting and make the defenses more varied. Or imagine that you had a limited amount of currency that you could go over to the shop and buy some extra defenses. Some stuff like turrets or traps or things that would detect enemies, you know, like in Rainbow Six Siege or Valorant. And if I'm comparing any game to Valorant, and I think Valorant is the one that's coming out on top, we're in some fucking trouble. Okay, so you have the dome shield around your base open up, and we're now going into phase 2, the loot phase, and I'm so sorry. This shit sucks too. Yeah, I think the majority of the legitimate complaints and issues for this game come from this portion, because just what the fuck is going on here? So essentially before the next phase, you were supposed to utilize this time to explore the map and gear up, but man, this is where shit really starts to go sideways. First off, look at this fucking map. This is huge. Like, the Battlefield 6 community is over there in the corner just begging for some of these maps. The difference here is, at least in a game like Battlefield, you have the player numbers to fill those maps up. This is a 3v3 game. Why do you need so much space to account for 6 people? Like, I think the maps look visually fucking great, and they have an awesome sense of scale. They really remind me of some of the maps that we saw in Apex Legends. From a design standpoint, they're really solid in a vacuum, but the problem is that each of these individual maps is maybe like a third of the size of an Apex map, give or take. Like, I obviously don't have the means to 100% scale them, but that's just how big they feel, and yeah, that's way too fucking big. You could adjust the lobby size to 5v5, 6v6, 8v8, hell, you could do 12v12 if you wanted, and I still think these maps would be a bit much. There will undoubtedly be portions of the map that you will never fucking travel to, because why would you? It almost feels like these maps were just taken from another game, or at least another game mode, and slapped into here. But even just adding more players wouldn't solve every issue, and in fact, it will create another one, because now you have to completely rebalance the loot economy. Oh yeah, that's right, you get to loot stuff in this game because, you know, Apex Legends. Oh, I wish the looting was even half as interesting as Apex though. So, you have 2 sources of doing this, grabbing chests or going to the shop. Grabbing the chest is something you're probably familiar with if you played any Battle Royale before. You open a chest, you'll get an assortment of items. In this game, the red chest will give you weapons, while the blue ones will give you a miscellaneous grab bag of some other items that you'll probably want. You can also get all of these same items by buying them in one of the few shops dotted around the map. You can get currency by getting kills, but considering how big the maps are, you're going to be wasting a lot of time running to the other side of the arena for a chance of having that happen, when you can instead just smash these crystal deposits around the map for a more guaranteed payout. Plus, it's not like getting these kills really nets you that much more money anyways, so it's almost always better to just grab chests and these crystals anyway. In order to collect the crystals, you walk up, do a little minigame to break them, and then boom, you got some cash to spend at the shop. Real riveting stuff. Why is this in the game? The shop will basically have tiered up versions of all your basic gear, an assortment of siege weapons, extra armor, some wall fortifications if you didn't get your fill from phase 1, and a few weapons available for purchase. I don't know why they don't just allow you to buy whichever weapon you want, but whatever. The other annoying thing about the looting phase is that everything is locked to a certain tier for every round you play. So round 1 will only have up to blue rarity, round 2 for purple, and round 3 for orange. This essentially neuters any potential fun of looting, since you're not going to find anything that really gives you that much of an edge, and if you just make it to round 3, it's very likely everyone will be rocking all legendary weapons, armor, and some extra gear anyways, so what's the fucking point? You know that moment when you're playing Apex or Fortnite or Warzone, when you're early on in the game and you find a legendary weapon that could really give you the edge? That shit is awesome, right? Well, how about instead they make it impossible for you to get any legendary gear early on, but now you just get them handed out to you like candy if you survive until the 3rd circle. If everyone is decked out in mostly legendary gear, is it even that special anymore? No. No, it's not. I think this part of the game just needs to be completely taken out and overhauled. This is just straight up fucking bad. So knowing that these guys were also behind Titanfall and Apex Legends, one of the first things I was wondering was how fluid the movement was going to be. It is not as good as either of those games, especially not Titanfall, but it's not bad either. From just the hero movement, you obviously have some abilities that can give you some boost depending on who you're playing, but everyone can do this little wall climb thing that helps you get to some areas slightly faster. You're not getting the wall running from Titanfall or even the sliding from Apex here, which at first I thought was surprising given how many hills were on this map. I was really confused by that until I realized that they don't have this type of movement because they basically want to have the mount system supplement that. The mounts themselves essentially supply a speed boost for the hero riding it, but it can also be shot and killed that gives a brief stun to the hero that was mounted. It's not a bad mechanic. You even get these little archways that you can ride through for a burst of speed. Look, it's no Titanfall 2, but for what it is, it's okay. I kind of wish that instead of a selection of mounts, each hero got their own that could make their kit a little bit more character defining, but what we have here is fine enough, I suppose. So that was a load of mechanics for just talking about the second phase. Let's get into phase 3, which is collecting the Shieldbreaker and driving it towards the enemy base. So about a minute into your looting phase, you'll get an icon that tells you where the Shieldbreaker is going to spawn in another minute. This is in one of a few predetermined locations on the map, and when you get there, it feels almost like a completely different game. Like, these portions honestly look and feel a lot more like your standard 6v6 arena shooter maps rather than the wide open fields that we were just in. These honestly wouldn't feel too out of place in like Destiny 2's Crucible. So the two teams will collide here with one grabbing the Shieldbreaker and then making a push towards the enemy's base. The problem with this is that if you die during the scuffle and don't get revived by a teammate, you are not only greeted with an overly long respawn timer, but also a long ass ride back from your base to where the action is unless you have a particular hero on your team. And in most instances, by the time you get back there, it is probably too late to really make a difference, and you're better off setting up shop somewhere else to fight. You can thankfully spawn closer to the Shieldbreaker carrier if they're on your team, but if you're defending, you have no such option. This makes these arena areas kind of pointless since you're not really going to have more than one engagement of them during a game, and you'll never return to them again. It's not like they're advantageous to cut through since they don't allow you to use your mount while you're in them, and they don't really have any better loot than anywhere else on the map, so they just exist as a waste of level design. I guess now would be a good time to talk about the combat and shooting mechanics, since now will be the first time that you're actually engaging enemies in a game of Highguard. You know, like 4 minutes into the match. So I kind of went in expecting the gunplay to be like Titanfall, but it's actually a little bit closer to Apex given that every weapon is projectile based and not a hit scan. So if you like the gunplay in Apex, then I think you'll like it here as well because it's more or less the same. I suppose my biggest gripe with the combat might actually be the directional audio because I think it's straight up horrible. Like, you can hear footsteps and gunfire and whatnot from a general direction that it came from, but you can't tell how close, if it's above or below you, if there's a wall in between you. It just feels outdated compared to other games that have fantastic audio, like Arc Raiders or Hunt Showdown. So when you grab the Shieldbreaker, you need to hightail it to the enemy base and plunge it into one of 3 points around the perimeter in order to make it to the next phase. The whole section becomes like a reverse version of Capture the Flag, and I think this has the potential to probably be some of the most fun that you can have in Highguard. Everyone is on their mount, rushing towards the base while the enemy is trying to ambush you in whatever way they can to steal the Shieldbreaker, so they can do the same to you. It's easily some of the most high-octane moments in Highguard, which is weird because there's literally no music during these sections. It's also probably the one excuse for the maps being as large as they are, since they at least allow for some more encounters, though I would have preferred a smaller map size and lower respawn timers if we're just going to use that as an excuse. So again, this section is legitimately engaging, but it still feels like something's missing here. Like, when I'm playing through these sections, it reminds me of playing Capture the Flag in Halo, and one of the fun things about that mode is that the game really encourages teamwork. Like, the person holding the flag can't shoot their guns, and they have to ride passenger if they're going to get into vehicle, while another player controls it, and I can't help but feel that Highguard would have been a little bit better if it copied a little bit closer to Halo's homework here. I think this is where having a higher player count could shine through as well, since that would make it so the higher attacking team doesn't have that much of a disadvantage. I think the tiebreaker part of this phase could honestly use some work too. Basically, after the first 2 minutes of the Shieldbreaker being picked up, everyone will be given 1 life and the last team standing will have won the phase and they get moved on to the next one. I think 2 minutes for this is on the stingy side here, and I would honestly say that about 50% of my games went into tiebreakers during this portion, and that comes up a bit too frequently in my book. Personally, I don't think having an overtime mechanic here is bad, but seeing it at 2 minutes is just way too fast and doesn't really allow for an interesting back and forth push between teams. Like, think about how tense the gameplay could be if you and the enemy traded the Shieldbreaker 5 or 6 times for someone to finally get that siege off. That would be a pretty fun moment. I don't know. Overall, I see the vision of where the fun can be had in this phase of the game, but I feel like this idea is like 2/3 of the way done, if you get what I'm saying. A couple of changes or additions could really make this part of the game something special in my mind. Finally, we come to phase 4 and 5, which will either be attacking the enemy's base or defending your base, depending on wherever the Shieldbreaker ends up. This part of the game is also actually pretty decent. It really just kind of plays like Siege or Valorant, or actually the best comparison might be Breakthrough from the newer Battlefield games. The attackers will need to plant a bomb on an objective and then defend that bomb until it detonates. They're also given a limited number of lives in order to do this before the siege ends. Defenders will be able to keep reinforcing and rebuilding their walls and try to eliminate the attackers and fend them off in order to damage the opposite team's base. Again, this is actually pretty okay for what it is. This is the part of the game where everything comes to a head, and it's definitely the most realized portion here. I again do think it would be cooler if we had some more, hero-specific abilities for attack and defense, but for what we got here, it's not bad. It still isn't without its problems, though. Like, I think the attackers just get way too many options, given that the bases are just so big that even if one bomb site is being guarded, it's just as easy to flank over to one of the other two. The defenders can't really do much about that. They can rebuild walls, but when the attackers have so many means of destroying them and they have a shop nearby that can resupply them, it just makes everything a little too lopsided. Depending on how much damage was done to the defender's base will determine if a second, third, or even fourth round are needed, where you'll basically repeat everything from phase 2 over again. And that is your average match of Highguard. After that, you go back to the lobby, you look at the general bullshit that you see in every live service game, like, why the fuck does this game have 3 currencies? And then you decide to queue up again or uninstall. And I wouldn't blame you if you just decided to uninstall after that first game, because once you played one game of Highguard, every other game is going to be basically the same, more or less, with the only really thing changing is how many rounds it takes for you to either win or lose. I think the worst part about all of this is something that isn't really being spoken about that much, but this game just doesn't really have that wow factor that keeps me wanting to play. It doesn't have the play of the game from Overwatch, or the insane level of destruction from the finals, or the kill cams from Call of Duty, or the crazy plays and clutches from Counter-Strike, or even the Battlefield moments from, well, Battlefield. Nothing that I've seen in this game has even come close to being clip-worthy, if you get what I mean. And for a game that's trying to capture that more sweaty, skill-based competitive shooter crowd, they need that interaction to generate interest. Think about it. Since this game's come out, have you seen any montages or clips on TikTok or Reddit, or really any positive things said about this game, or any exciting stories being shared? No, there's just nothing to get excited about. You play a game of Highguard, you have an average to slightly below average time, and then you move on to the next game, never even considering what just happened before. It's like eating at Denny's. Like, nobody's ever going to tell you that they had a great experience there. In fact, they'll probably never even bring it up unless they had something especially bad. Except this Denny's is going through renovations, and there was no clear sign of these renovations ever being complete, so half the restaurant is in a dilapidated state. So yeah, there you go. There's your low-hanging fruit TLDR review of Highguard. It's the fucking dilapidated Denny's of gaming. Congratulations. And that is my 100% honest thoughts about everything that I've seen in Highguard, given my 10 hours. I don't want to be a person that's overly negative about anything, especially video games, since that is my primary hobby, but at the same time, this game just should not have been released like this. Like, if you remove all the Game Awards and Jeff Keighley drama, what we're left with is a confused and unfinished hero shooter that tries to mix way too many ideas together. I think this game should have been pushed back. The amount of bad press it received really should have called for a delay to let people's animosity die down, but more importantly, really flesh out the gameplay systems. I really do think that underneath all of the discourse, the rocky launch statistics, the unstable performance, and the questionable design decisions, there really is a great concept here, but this needs a lot more time in the oven. Like, another 2 to 3 years potentially. If I can thank Highguard for anything, it does kind of make me want to see a game like this be done correctly. I'm talking about a more fantastical style version of Valorant or Rainbow Six Siege's gameplay loop. Like, give us a real setup phase with some unique defenses to put down. Give us a looting phase that has us travel to different parts of the map, battle other players over loot that's worth getting, maybe do some mini objectives or destroy some NPC enemies to get some bonuses. I don't know, just something more than what we have here. Hell, get rid of mining the rocks entirely and just have us shoot some mobs for currency instead. Have the Shieldbreaker phase be a little bit more cooperative, kind of like CTF and Halo, and don't have it end so quickly. Give our heroes a bit more of an identity through exclusive mounts and abilities that complement the attacking and defending portions of the game. And then have all those ideas culminate in the siege and watch those sections be even stronger than they were before. Will Highguard become that one day? Well, if the roadmap is anything to go by, it doesn't seem like they have any overhaul plans anytime soon. Most of the things outlined seem to be in the new hero, new weapon, and new map variety, but I think all of that should just be placed on pause to get to the fundamental issues that this game has under the hood and have those be taken care of right away. We'll see what the fate ultimately befalls Highguard. It's obviously a much bigger success than Concord, and who knows, maybe in a few years we'll be talking about Highguard like we do with No Man's Sky or Final Fantasy XIV or Cyberpunk 2077 now. I don't personally think it'll end up that way, but I am rooting for the devs here, and I hope that they're able to turn this game around nevertheless. But hey, that's all the time that we have for today, so thank you for watching. If you played Highguard, what did you think of it? Let me know in the comments section down below, and hey, if you enjoyed today's video, maybe consider giving a like and subscribing. Thank you guys again, I'll catch you in the next video. Concord 2.